Hello, tonight you travel backward beyond kings, beyond monuments, and even beyond the first written names of history, into a quiet world where the future Indus Valley civilization still sleeps beneath layers of soft river mud, waiting patiently for thousands of years before the first brick is ever placed beneath the warm breath of the ancient sky. You stand beside a wide and silent plain in what is now northwestern South Asia, where the distant Himalayas release cold winds that drift slowly across tall grass and shallow water channels. The land feels almost endless beneath the pale dawn light, and the air carries the scent of wet soil, river reeds, and distant rain that has not yet arrived. The rivers move with ancient patience, spreading across the plains like silver ribbons beneath the pale morning mist. Cranes call softly above quiet marshes, while water birds drift through reeds near the shore. Nearby, a fisherman studies the still surface with the same calm dedication people now reserve for buffering internet screens. So, before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly enjoy what we're creating here. And while the night grows quieter around you, feel free to leave a comment sharing your local time and the place where you are listening from tonight. Somewhere across the world, another listener may be hearing this story beneath rain, desert wind, or the low hum of a sleeping city apartment. Now, slowly dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan, letting the steady hum of the air fill the room, and in that gentle rhythm, we quietly step into tonight's journey together. You move through a world before empires rise or armies draw borders across maps. The land belongs mostly to rivers, migrating animals, and seasonal floods, moving patiently beneath open skies. People follow water and sunlight without imagining future cities, while history itself still sleeps quietly beyond the distant horizon. Modern geological studies suggest this region once receives far more rainfall than today. Wide rivers cross fertile grasslands and scattered forests beneath soft drifting clouds and warm evening dust. The climate feels calmer and more forgiving, as though the earth itself breathes slowly beneath the steady rhythm of ancient seasons. As night settles over the plain, temperatures begin to fall. Thin fog rises quietly from the riverbanks and spreads across the dark earth like pale silk drifting over stone floors. In the distance, small fires flicker beside temporary camps where early farming communities gather together after sunset, speaking softly while sparks disappear upward into a sky overflowing with stars. At Mehrgarh, one of the earliest known settlements in South Asia, archaeologists discover evidence of farming and animal domestication dating back to around 7000 BCE. Long before pyramids rise beside the Nile, people here already plant barley, tend goats, and shape mud bricks beneath the afternoon sun. Civilization, it seems, begins not with conquest, but with careful repetition and patient hands. You can almost picture those early homes resting quietly beneath starlight. Their walls are simple and warm, made from sun-dried mud that holds the day's heat well into the evening hours. Nearby, woven baskets rest beside grinding stones, and the smell of grain drifts gently through narrow pathways where children chase one another before sleep slowly overtakes the settlement. The people here understand time differently from you. They do not measure life through crowded calendars, deadlines, or endless notifications. Instead, they watch rivers rise beneath changing skies and notice sunlight shifting across distant hills. Even returning birds matter deeply because survival depends upon observing the smallest rhythms of the natural world. Archaeologists also uncover evidence of surprisingly early dentistry at Mehrgarh, where several human teeth show signs of drilling performed nearly 9,000 years ago. Imagine sitting beside a healer while someone carefully works on your aching tooth using primitive stone tools. Modern dental appointments suddenly begin sounding slightly more relaxing, which honestly feels unfair to everyone alive today. The ancient pathways across this land remain narrow and unassuming. They connect water sources, campsites, and quiet gathering places rather than capitals or fortresses. Traders exchange shells, stones, animal skins, and stories carried slowly across great distances by memory alone. No one yet speaks of empires because the world still feels too wide and open for borders to fully exist. Many modern scientists believe that several ancient rivers once flowed through this region, including waterways connected to the legendary Saraswati River mentioned in later Indian traditions. Over immense stretches of time, tectonic shifts and changing monsoon patterns gradually weaken these rivers. The transformation happens so slowly that entire generations likely fail to notice the beginning of the change. You sit now beside one of these rivers as evening deepens further into night. The water reflects stars with such clarity that the surface appears almost endless, like another sky resting quietly beneath the earth. Frogs croak from reeds along the shore, and somewhere beyond the darkness, an animal moves carefully through tall grass without urgency or fear. The silence here feels different from modern silence. There are no engines, distant sirens, or glowing screens waiting impatiently for attention. Instead, the quiet carries texture. Wind brushes gently across dry reeds. Water taps softly against mud banks. A cooking fire crackles faintly before collapsing inward into orange embers that pulse slowly against the darkness. Over centuries, these small settlements continue growing almost invisibly. Families become villages. Villages become connected communities linked through trade and shared knowledge. People experiment with irrigation, grain storage, and more permanent architecture. Step by careful step, the foundations of one of humanity's greatest urban civilizations quietly begin forming beneath open skies and drifting monsoon clouds. Still, nothing arrives with drama or noise. There are no trumpets echoing across the plains, no grand moment announcing that history has changed forever. The Indus Valley civilization rises the way rivers shape stone or grass, slowly claims open earth, patient and nearly silent, until one day vast red brick cities stand beneath the ancient stars. The rivers continue shaping the land with extraordinary patience, spreading rich layers of silt across the wide plains year after year, until the earth itself begins to feel softer and more generous. Small settlements now remain in one place longer than before, and you can sense an unfamiliar stability settling gently over the region, like a blanket slowly pulled across tired shoulders at the end of a long evening. You wake before sunrise beside a growing settlement where cool night air still lingers softly above the fields. Low clouds drift inland from the Arabian Sea while water moves quietly through hand-dug irrigation channels nearby. Beneath your feet, damp earth and young barley release a rich scent into the calm morning darkness. Morning arrives slowly across the valley. Thin silver light spreads over the river between reeds and pale sandbanks, while fishermen wait silently in shallow water nearby. Birds glide overhead without urgency, and even the animals seem unusually calm, as though the steady rhythm of this landscape quietly teaches patience to every living creature. Modern pollen analysis reveals that the ancient Indus region once supports a far richer ecosystem than the dry terrain visible today. Thick grasses cover broad floodplains, shrubs cluster beside riverbanks, and wild elephants, deer, and water buffalo move slowly through open woodland. At times, the environment resembles a peaceful nature documentary, narrated by someone who has consumed perhaps one too many cups of herbal tea. The people living here do not yet build monumental temples or royal palaces, yet their understanding of seasonal cycles becomes increasingly sophisticated. They observe the moon carefully, predict flood patterns, and organize planting seasons with remarkable precision. Time itself feels less like a straight line and more like the steady turning of a wheel that never fully stops moving beneath the stars. As evening approaches, smoke rises gently from cooking fires positioned outside clusters of mud brick homes. You notice women grinding grain on flat stones, while children chase each other across dusty paths between storage pits and animal pens. Nearby, older villagers repair woven baskets beneath fading sunlight, speaking in calm voices that blend softly with the rustling grass and distant water birds. Archaeologists later uncover early copper objects, polished bone tools, and delicate carnelian beads across many settlements throughout the region. These discoveries suggest that quiet trade networks already connect distant communities long before the great Indus cities rise. Goods travel slowly between villages through trust and familiar river paths, while one sunset trader arrives carrying seashells gathered from distant coastal waters. Another carries fine stones from distant mountains where cold winds move through narrow valleys year-round. Their journeys take weeks or even months, yet nobody seems especially rushed. In this world, arriving safely matters far more than arriving quickly, which honestly feels healthier than modern airport culture. At night, the sky opens above the settlement with startling clarity. There are no city lights to soften the darkness, no smoke thick enough to hide the stars. Constellations stretch across the heavens in sharp white patterns, while the Milky Way glows faintly overhead like powdered salt scattered across black stone. You understand why ancient people attach stories and meaning to these endless lights. The riverbanks preserve traces of daily life in quiet and temporary ways. Children leave footprints in wet mud while chasing stray goats along the shoreline, only for the marks to disappear completely after the next flood. The scene feels strangely comforting. Human life appears important in the moment, yet nature gently reminds everyone that permanence belongs mostly to rivers, mountains, and time itself. Many scholars believe that the unusual stability of the Indus climate during this period plays a major role in the civilization's gradual success. Unlike several neighboring regions constantly disrupted by severe droughts or warfare, the Indus communities enjoy centuries of relatively predictable weather patterns. The land rewards consistency, and people slowly build routines around that dependable generosity. You begin noticing subtle improvements in daily infrastructure as settlements expand. Storage rooms become larger and more carefully organized. Pathways are widened to allow easier movement between homes and communal spaces. Wells are reinforced with mud brick rings to prevent collapse during heavy rains. None of these changes appear dramatic individually, yet together they quietly transform scattered villages into structured communities. One fascinating archaeological detail emerges from this era through the discovery of standardized pottery styles shared across distant settlements. Similar shapes, patterns, and construction methods appear again and again over wide areas, suggesting strong cultural connections between communities. Even 4,000 years ago, people apparently appreciate matching kitchenware more than historians originally expect. During the hottest hours of the afternoon, much of the settlement becomes still beneath the heavy sun. Animals retreat into shade beside walls made from packed earth, while workers rest near water jars covered with damp cloth to keep the contents cool. You sit quietly beneath a woven shelter, listening to insects hum in the heat like tiny machines operating far beyond human concern. The slow expansion of these river communities does not erase the natural world surrounding them. Marsh birds still nest near irrigation canals. Fish continue moving through seasonal floodwaters. Wild grasses bend in warm evening winds exactly as they do centuries earlier. Human civilization grows here not by overpowering nature completely, but by learning how to move gently within its patterns. As generations pass, craftsmanship becomes more refined. Potters shape smoother vessels. Builders experiment with stronger bricks dried beneath the open sun. Farmers improve grain storage techniques that protect food through difficult seasons. Every improvement arrives gradually, without spectacle, like water deepening a river channel through years of nearly invisible movement beneath the current. And somewhere in the pale mist of another ancient dawn, you hear the faint sound of tools striking clay for the very first time. It is only a quiet tapping carried softly through cool morning air, yet those careful blows mark the beginning of something enormous. The first true bricks of the Indus world are slowly entering human hands beneath the silent and patient stars. Around 2600 BCE, the quiet villages along the Indus River begin transforming into something remarkably organized. Cities such as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro rise slowly from the plains with an orderliness that feels almost modern in spirit. You do not see towering monuments announcing the power of kings. Instead, you encounter balance, rhythm, and streets arranged with such care that the entire city seems to breathe calmly beneath the sun. You enter Mohenjo-daro shortly after dawn, while cool air still lingers between rows of red brick buildings. Soft light stretches across long, straight streets, intersecting at careful angles, as though the city has been patiently measured upon the earth itself. Everything feels orderly, calm, deliberate, and remarkably balanced beneath the pale morning sky. Archaeologists later admire this grid system because few ancient cities display such careful planning and precision. Roads maintain consistent widths, while neighborhoods connect naturally with wells, workshops, and shared public spaces. Walking here feels oddly familiar, like entering a modern town where someone finally decides confusing streets should not become humanity's permanent architectural tradition. The city settles into a gentle rhythm as morning slowly unfolds across the streets and courtyards. Merchants open workshops while potters shape clay beneath warm sunlight, drifting over brick walls. Nearby, stone tools polish carnelian beads with soft scraping sounds, while a thin stream of water disappears neatly beneath a covered drain beside the road. That drainage system becomes one of the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient world. Beneath nearly every neighborhood, baked brick channels carry wastewater safely away from homes and public buildings. Some houses even contain private bathing areas connected directly to these drains. 4,000 years later, many modern cities still struggle with infrastructure problems that Indus engineers somehow approach with impressive calm efficiency. Inside the homes, daily life feels modest, yet carefully arranged. Most buildings rise no higher than 2 stories, constructed from standardized bricks baked under the intense sun. Rooms surround central courtyards where families prepare meals, weave cloth, or rest during the hottest parts of the day. The architecture favors comfort and practicality rather than dramatic displays of wealth or power. One of the most curious details about Indus civilization is the absence of obvious royal palaces or giant tombs. In Egypt, rulers build pyramids visible for miles across the desert. In Mesopotamia, kings commission massive temples towering above crowded cities. Yet here, the skyline remains relatively even and restrained, leading many historians to believe power may have been distributed more evenly than elsewhere in the ancient world. As afternoon light softens across the city, artisans continue their patient work beneath woven shades stretched between buildings. A bead maker rotates tiny stones against polishing surfaces for hours at a time until they glow warmly in the sunlight. Watching the process feels almost hypnotic. Somewhere nearby, another worker probably insists that his bead collection will absolutely become a profitable business opportunity someday. Trade flourishes quietly throughout the Indus world. Standardized stone weights allow merchants to measure goods with surprising accuracy, and evidence suggests these systems remain consistent across vast distances. Such precision implies a society deeply committed to fairness, predictability, and orderly exchange. Even the marketplaces seem calmer than those of neighboring civilizations, as though shouting prices aggressively would somehow disturb the carefully maintained civic atmosphere. You pass through narrow lanes where merchants press seals into damp clay attached to bundles of goods waiting for transport. These small, square seals contain symbols that remain undeciphered even in the modern world. Some display animals such as bulls, elephants, or rhinoceroses, while others depict strange composite creatures that seem to belong partly to reality and partly to dreams carried quietly through generations. The mystery of the Indus script remains one of archaeology's greatest unanswered questions. Thousands of inscriptions survive, yet none are long enough to unlock the language with certainty. You imagine scholars centuries later leaning over photographs of these symbols late into the night, surrounded by coffee cups and frustration, wondering whether the answer has been hiding in plain sight all along. At the center of Mohenjo-daro stands the Great Bath, one of the civilization's most famous structures. Built from finely fitted bricks sealed with bitumen to prevent leaks, the pool likely serves ceremonial or communal purposes. Water enters and drains through carefully engineered channels, reflecting a culture deeply concerned with cleanliness and ritual order. Even ancient bathing routines here possess an oddly serene elegance. As sunset approaches, warm light spreads across the city walls, turning the baked bricks a deep reddish gold. Dust drifts softly through the air, while families gather on rooftops where evening breezes provide relief from the heat. Somewhere below, cooks prepare lentils and flatbread over small fires, and the comforting smell moves gently through the straight, quiet streets. Night in Mohenjo-daro carries a peaceful stillness, unlike the noisy chaos often imagined in ancient cities. Heat slowly leaves the brick walls, while footsteps echo through narrow lanes beneath the open sky. Oil lamps flicker softly behind wooden shutters, and distant voices drift surprisingly far through the cool darkness surrounding the sleeping city tonight. Archaeologists later discover that many homes contain access to nearby wells and carefully planned water systems supporting thousands of residents. Some neighborhoods include communal gathering spaces designed for shared daily routines and cooperation. These achievements reveal not only technical intelligence, but also a society valuing stability, cleanliness, and practical organization over military spectacle alone. You slowly realize that the true strength of the Indus civilization rests not in conquest or dramatic displays of power, but in consistency. Streets remain orderly, while trade flows steadily through carefully maintained systems season after season. The civilization expands quietly, much like a river widening across open plains beneath skies far larger than any individual life. And as darkness settles gently across Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, the cities continue resting beneath the stars with remarkable calm. No giant statues rise above the streets, only quiet homes, glowing lamps, straight roads, and water flowing softly beneath brick-lined pathways into the earth below. Morning begins softly in the cities of the Indus Valley, long before the streets fully awaken beneath the pale gold light of sunrise. You hear ropes creaking gently as water is lifted from deep wells scattered throughout the neighborhoods. Residents pass one another quietly in narrow lanes, carrying clay jars balanced carefully against their hips, while cool air still lingers between the red brick walls. Archaeologists eventually uncover more than 700 wells within Mohenjo-daro alone, an astonishing number for an ancient city. The discovery suggests a civilization deeply committed to cleanliness, routine, and reliable public infrastructure. Water here is not treated as a luxury reserved for elites. It belongs to daily life itself, woven naturally into the rhythm of ordinary existence. You walk through the marketplace as merchants slowly prepare for the day ahead. There is no frantic shouting or chaotic bargaining. Instead, the atmosphere feels measured and calm, almost ceremonial in its quiet repetition. Wooden stalls display polished beads, woven cotton cloth, carved shells, and jars filled with grain, while sunlight gradually warms the dusty ground beneath your feet. Some of the objects surrounding you travel incredible distances before arriving in these peaceful streets. Lapis lazuli stones come from the mountains of present-day Afghanistan, their deep blue surfaces glowing like fragments of twilight sky. Copper arrives from Oman, and shells from the Arabian Sea are shaped carefully into jewelry. The marketplace becomes a meeting point for worlds separated by deserts, rivers, and long, patient journeys. Ancient Sumerian texts from Mesopotamia mention a distant trading region called Meluha, which many historians believe refers to the Indus civilization. Merchants from these lands likely exchanged timber, ivory, cotton, textiles, and precious stones through maritime trade routes crossing the Arabian Sea. Somewhere in a Mesopotamian port, an exhausted sailor probably complains about shipping delays exactly as people still do today. Along the riverbanks, wooden boats drift slowly through thick brown water, heavy with fertile silt carried down from the Himalayas. Their hulls creak softly as they transport grain, pottery, and bundles of cloth between settlements connected by waterways rather than roads. The boats move so gently that reflected sunlight trembles across the surface like scattered pieces of broken silver. Cotton becomes one of the Indus civilization's most remarkable achievements. Archaeologists discover evidence that these people are among the earliest in the world to cultivate and weave cotton textiles on a large scale. Imagine touching fabrics softer and lighter than heavy wool garments worn elsewhere at the time. In the brutal summer heat, breathable clothing quickly becomes less of a luxury and more of a survival strategy. Throughout the markets, merchants use carefully standardized stone weights to measure goods with extraordinary precision. Cubes carved from chert appear in consistent ratios across cities separated by hundreds of miles, indicating a highly organized economic system. The reliability of these measurements helps maintain trust between traders, which may explain why commercial life here feels unusually stable and cooperative for such a vast civilization. You stop beside a potter shaping clay beneath a shaded awning while his hands move with calm, practiced rhythm. Nearby, finished vessels dry slowly in the warm afternoon air, decorated with geometric patterns, fish symbols, and flowing curved lines. Even ordinary objects within the Indus world seem carefully balanced, carrying a quiet sense of harmony and repetition. Children play inside shaded courtyards near large water jars filled earlier that morning from nearby wells. Their laughter drifts softly through the narrow lanes, while older relatives prepare meals of lentils, barley, sesame, and dates nearby. The smell of baked grain mixes with warm dust, while one wandering goat behaves confidently enough to suggest legal ownership. By late afternoon, sunlight deepens into rich amber tones that spread across the brick architecture of the city. Thin streams of sand drift through the air from distant dry lands beyond the fertile river plains. The atmosphere feels peaceful rather than harsh, and many residents retreat briefly indoors, where thick walls protect against the hottest hours of the day. One of the most striking features of the Indus civilization remains the relative absence of evidence for large-scale warfare. Archaeologists discover few weapons compared with many contemporary societies, and city walls appear designed more for flood control than military defense. While conflict likely exists in some form, the civilization seems to prioritize administration, trade, and urban order over constant expansion through violence. The city's infrastructure quietly supports this atmosphere of stability. Public wells provide reliable access to water, drainage systems reduce disease, and standardized construction methods allow neighborhoods to expand efficiently over time. These achievements may not sound dramatic compared with tales of conquering armies, yet they create something far rarer in history: long-lasting civic calm. As evening approaches, workers begin returning home through streets glowing softly beneath the descending sun. Traders seal storage jars with clay impressions, while boatmen secure their vessels beside wooden docks along the river. Smoke from cooking fires rises slowly into the darkening sky, carrying familiar scents through neighborhoods that have followed nearly identical routines for generations. Yet subtle changes are already beginning far beyond the horizon. Seasonal rains become slightly less predictable in certain regions. Some waterways shift course gradually over long stretches of time, while distant grasslands grow marginally drier with each passing century. Nobody notices a sudden catastrophe because none exists. The transformation begins quietly, almost invisibly, hidden within ordinary seasons. You stand now beside the river at dusk, while the city settles gently into night. The water reflects fading light beneath drifting clouds, and boats rock softly against the shore with slow, repetitive motions. Everything still feels secure, carefully ordered and enduring. Yet somewhere beyond sight, the land itself has already begun changing direction with the patience of geological time. And so the Indus civilization continues flourishing beside calm waters and measured streets, unaware that even the most stable rivers eventually reshape their banks. For now, though, the markets remain full, the wells remain deep, and the soft sound of commerce drifts peacefully beneath the first quiet stars of evening. After around 2200 BCE, the world of the Indus Valley begins changing in ways so gradual that few people fully recognize them at first. Nothing dramatic appears on the horizon. No single storm destroys the cities. Instead, the climate shifts quietly, like the slow turning of a sleeping body beneath blankets during the middle of the night, subtle enough to escape immediate notice. The monsoon rains still arrive each year, yet something about them feels slightly different now. Clouds gather later than before over the distant Arabian Sea, and the long seasonal downpours grow less dependable across certain regions. Farmers continue planting crops with practiced confidence, though older villagers occasionally pause beside fields and mention that the rivers once rise higher in their childhood memories. Modern sediment studies reveal evidence of centuries-long environmental change throughout the Indus region. Layers of ancient soil suggest decreasing rainfall and increasing aridity over time, particularly along some river systems. These transformations occur slowly across generations rather than within sudden disasters. The earth itself seems to exhale differently, altering the balance between water, soil, and survival with immense patience. You walk beside fields that still produce barley and wheat, though the ground now feels drier beneath your sandals by late summer. Cracks form more often in hardened mud near irrigation channels, and farmers must guide water more carefully than before. Some boats traveling along smaller waterways begin scraping shallow riverbeds with uncomfortable regularity, which ancient sailors probably find about as irritating as modern drivers hitting potholes. Many scholars believe the Ghaggar-Hakra river system, possibly linked to the legendary Saraswati River mentioned within later Vedic traditions, gradually weakens as tectonic shifts alter regional waterways and monsoon rains become less dependable. Rivers once spreading confidently across wide floodplains slowly shrink into narrower seasonal channels that appear and disappear beneath increasingly dry skies. Entire communities begin noticing small but meaningful changes unfolding across familiar landscapes over many generations. Wells require deeper digging while farmland dries earlier during late summer months. Waterways trusted for centuries no longer behave predictably, forcing settlements to adapt carefully. Even fishermen quietly realize certain riverbanks now remain strangely silent where strong currents once continuously flow. Yet daily life within the cities does not collapse overnight. Mohenjo-daro still wakes each morning to the sound of wells and footsteps echoing through organized streets. Merchants continue weighing goods with stone cubes polished smooth through generations of handling. Potters still shape clay vessels beneath shaded courtyards, while bead makers polish carnelian until it glows warmly beneath afternoon sunlight. At night, however, subtle signs of environmental change drift quietly through the sleeping cities. Winds blowing from the Thar Desert carry slightly more dust than before, coating rooftops and alleyways with thin layers of sand. Most residents hardly notice the difference at first. After all, dust belongs naturally to dry landscapes, and gradual change rarely announces itself with dramatic speeches. You stand upon a rooftop during one particularly warm evening as fine grains of sand move softly through the air beneath a pale moon. The city remains peaceful below you. Oil lamps flicker beside doorways, distant voices rise gently through the night, and water still flows through the drainage channels beneath the streets. Everything appears stable enough to continue forever, which is often how long historical transitions begin. Archaeologists later observe evidence that some settlements begin shifting eastward during this period, toward regions where rainfall remains more reliable. Families relocate gradually, rather than all at once, carrying tools, pottery styles, farming knowledge, and cultural traditions into new landscapes. Migration here resembles water slowly changing course across a plain, not crowds fleeing suddenly from catastrophe. The remarkable resilience of the Indus people becomes increasingly clear during these centuries. Grain storage systems continue functioning effectively. Trade persists along surviving routes. Urban infrastructure remains maintained despite environmental pressure, building slowly around the civilization. Instead of reacting with panic, communities adapt through small practical adjustments repeated across generations until entirely new settlement patterns quietly emerge. Even the marketplaces continue operating with familiar calm. Boats still arrive carrying copper, shells, and textiles, though some journeys now require longer detours due to changing waterways. Merchants adapt patiently because ancient trade depends not on speed, but on persistence. Somewhere along a dusty route, a tired trader probably insists the trip used to take half as long before the rivers decided to become difficult. Scientific studies suggest that climate instability affects not only agriculture, but also the massive interconnected trade networks supporting urban life throughout the Indus world. Long-distance commerce becomes harder to sustain when river systems grow unpredictable and harvests less consistent. Economic strain appears slowly, almost invisibly, hidden beneath the ordinary routines of everyday existence. You notice subtle changes in the atmosphere of the cities themselves. Certain neighborhoods feel less crowded than before, while maintenance on some buildings becomes slightly less precise over time. The great civilization still functions beautifully in many ways, yet there is now a quiet sense of adjustment beneath the surface, like musicians subtly changing tempo without interrupting the melody of a familiar song. The most fascinating aspect of this transition may be its gentleness. History often teaches collapse through images of fire, invasion, and destruction, yet the Indus civilization begins transforming through environmental pressure spread across centuries. Rivers shift, Rain patterns change, populations adapt. Civilization bends slowly with the landscape rather than shattering immediately against it. As evening deepens once more across the river plains, the cities glow softly beneath drifting dust and fading light. Wells still provide water. Workshops still hum quietly with labor. Children still leave footprints beside canals that will vanish by morning. Yet somewhere beyond sight, the climate continues turning with immense geological patience, reshaping the future one nearly invisible season at a time. And so the Indus world enters a new chapter not through violence or sudden ruin, but through gradual transformation woven carefully into ordinary life. The rivers still flow beneath the stars, though now they move with slightly less certainty than before, carrying the civilization slowly toward a future no one living there can fully imagine yet. The great cities of the Indus Valley do not vanish beneath storms of fire or waves of invading armies. Instead, they grow quieter slowly, almost gently, across many generations. Streets that once carried the footsteps of thousands begin holding longer stretches of silence between each passing figure. The transformation feels less like destruction and more like the gradual dimming of a lantern left burning through the night. You walk now through Mohenjo-daro during its later years, and although the city still stands proudly beneath the sun, subtle changes reveal themselves everywhere. Certain walls lean slightly where repairs are delayed too long. Some drainage channels no longer flow as smoothly as before. The great urban machine continues functioning, yet it does so with the weary rhythm of something carrying the weight of centuries. Archaeologists studying the final occupational layers of Mohenjo-daro notice that building quality slowly declines over time. Earlier bricks are carefully shaped and uniformly measured, while later construction often appears less precise and hurried. It is as though generations of craftsmen inherit an enormous system requiring endless maintenance, eventually discovering that even the most orderly civilization cannot repair everything forever. Some homes are divided into smaller living spaces, suggesting shifts in family structure or economic conditions. Courtyards, once belonging to single households, become shared areas separated by rough interior walls. Entire neighborhoods appear less densely populated than before. Yet even these changes happen gradually, without sudden abandonment, like furniture quietly rearranged inside a familiar room after many long years. For much of the 20th century, historians believe the Indus civilization may have fallen due to violent invasion. Early theories speak dramatically of armies sweeping into the cities and destroying urban life through warfare. Modern evidence, however, tells a calmer and more complicated story. Archaeology reveals surprisingly little proof of widespread military devastation across the major settlements. Instead, most scholars today view the decline of the Indus civilization as a long environmental and social transition, unfolding quietly across many centuries. Climate changes gradually weaken agricultural systems, while seasonal monsoons become less reliable than before. Rivers shift unpredictably across the plains, and some waterways dry for part of the year beneath increasingly fragile weather patterns. As water sources grow less dependable, trade networks become harder to maintain across such enormous distances. Communities slowly relocate toward regions offering steadier rainfall and more reliable rivers for farming. The civilization does not collapse in one dramatic moment. Instead, it adapts carefully generation after generation until the old urban centers no longer remain practical to sustain. Evenings in these later cities likely feel very different from the bustling nights of earlier centuries. The markets close earlier now, and fewer boats arrive along the riverbanks carrying distant goods. Wind echoes softly through partially empty streets where voices once overlapped continuously beneath glowing oil lamps. Some wells still draw water, though others stand unused beside buildings slowly surrendering themselves to dust and time. You pause beside a public square where children once played beneath the afternoon sun. The space now feels larger somehow, not because the architecture changes, but because fewer people remain to fill it with movement and sound. A single potter works quietly nearby shaping simple storage vessels, while thin desert wind moves gently through abandoned alleyways beyond the square. One of the most haunting mysteries of the Indus civilization involves its writing system. The carved symbols pressed into seals and tablets gradually disappear during this period until the script vanishes completely from historical use. No bilingual inscriptions survive to help modern scholars decode the language. The civilization leaves behind thousands of messages, yet carries away the key required to understand them. You imagine the final generation capable of reading those symbols fluently. Perhaps they never realize the script is nearing extinction. A merchant still marks trade goods with familiar characters. An artisan still carves tiny inscriptions into stone seals beneath afternoon light. Somewhere, someone probably complains about difficult handwriting exactly as people continue doing thousands of years later in office meetings and classrooms. Archaeological evidence suggests that many residents do not die within the cities, but rather relocate gradually into smaller rural settlements scattered farther east. The urban centers lose population slowly, while village life becomes increasingly important once again. This shift reflects adaptation rather than collapse alone. Human communities continue surviving, though in quieter and less centralized forms than before. At night, Mohenjo-daro grows noticeably still. Fewer lamps burn behind windows, and the organized streets that once symbolized confidence and stability now seem almost too large for the remaining population. Wind moves softly through broken corners of brick walls, while loose dust gathers against doorways left unopened for seasons at a time. Yet even in decline, traces of remarkable civic order remain visible everywhere. Drainage systems still run beneath certain streets. Wells continue providing water to surviving neighborhoods. Standardized bricks hold their shape despite centuries of weather and neglect. The civilization does not disappear completely in a single moment, because its foundations are built carefully enough to outlast many of the people who construct them. One fascinating detail archaeologists notice is that some later centers preserve older Indus traditions while simplifying urban complexity. Pottery styles continue. Agricultural techniques survive. Trade practices evolve rather than ending entirely. Civilization changes shape gradually, instead of simply ending. Much like a river branching into smaller channels across a broad and shifting plain. You sit quietly beside the edge of the city while dusk settles over the rooftops. The sky turns pale violet above distant drylands, and somewhere a wooden door creaks softly in the evening wind. There are no dramatic final speeches, no grand declarations marking the end of an era. The city simply becomes quieter year after year, until silence itself begins occupying the empty spaces. And through it all, time continues moving with complete indifference. Dust settles across abandoned walls. Sand gathers slowly inside unused courtyards. The stars still rise above the plains exactly as they always have. Beneath those endless skies, one of humanity's greatest civilizations slowly steps away from history without ever truly raising its voice. As the western regions of the Indus world grow steadily drier, many families begin moving eastward toward lands where rivers still flow more reliably through fertile plains. The migration happens so gradually that no single generation fully witnesses the transformation in its entirety. Instead, people simply continue following water, season after season, carrying their lives carefully across the changing landscape. You walk beside one such family traveling along dusty paths beneath a pale morning sky. Oxen pull wooden carts loaded with grain jars, woven baskets, tools, and folded textiles faded gently by years of sunlight. Children move quietly beside the adults, while older relatives pause often to rest beneath scattered trees. The journey feels patient and practical, rather than desperate, shaped more by necessity than fear. These movements do not form one enormous migration, but countless smaller departures unfolding across centuries. Some communities relocate only short distances to nearby river valleys, while others continue farther east toward the Ganges Plain. Entire populations never abandon the old cities all at once. Instead, the civilization slowly redistributes itself like water finding new channels across an uneven field after heavy rain. The eastern lands welcome these settlers with fertile soil nourished by dependable rivers and seasonal rainfall. Small farming communities emerge gradually across the plains where wheat, millet, and legumes continue growing successfully despite changing climate conditions farther west. Herds of cattle move slowly through open grasslands beneath warm afternoon sunlight, while birds circle lazily overhead in the thick, humid air. You notice that many familiar traditions survive the journey remarkably well. Pottery styles resemble those once common in Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Brick-making techniques continue appearing in new settlements, though often on smaller scales than before. Certain patterns carved into jewelry and tools remain strangely recognizable, like fragments of an older world quietly preserved inside newer forms of daily life. Archaeologists believe numerous cultural elements from the Indus civilization gradually blend into later South Asian societies rather than disappearing entirely. Urban planning ideas, agricultural knowledge, craft traditions, and systems of trade may all continue influencing communities long after the great cities themselves lose prominence. Civilization here transforms through absorption and adaptation instead of complete erasure. One especially fascinating detail involves several Indus seals depicting seated human figures positioned in ways that resemble meditative postures associated with later yogic traditions. Some scholars cautiously suggest possible cultural continuity between these ancient images and spiritual practices emerging centuries afterward across the Indian subcontinent. While certainty remains impossible, the resemblance invites quiet reflection beneath the long shadow of history. You imagine an elderly traveler resting beside an eastern riverbank while quietly telling children about the cities left behind generations earlier. He describes long straight streets, deep wells, and rows of sturdy brick homes staying cool beneath summer heat. The children listen with polite curiosity, though the stories already feel distant, dreamlike, and almost mythical to younger minds. Afternoons along these migration routes feel calm despite uncertainty surrounding the future. Dust rises softly beneath slow-moving cattle, while distant thunderclouds gather over greener eastern plains. Families stop beside streams to prepare simple meals using grains carried from earlier harvests. Somewhere nearby, a stubborn goat probably refuses to cooperate with absolutely everyone involved in the journey. The farther east communities travel, the more the memory of the old urban centers begins softening around the edges. New children grow up beside unfamiliar rivers, speaking in evolving dialects and adapting naturally to different landscapes. They inherit stories about ancient brick cities the way modern people inherit family legends about distant hometowns barely remembered except during long conversations late at night. Yet traces of the Indus world continue surviving quietly within ordinary habits. People still value careful water management and organized settlement patterns. Craftsmen continue shaping beads and pottery with techniques refined over generations. Agricultural routines developed beside the Indus River remain useful in new environments because practical knowledge travels more easily through time than monuments or political systems ever can. Modern historians increasingly understand the decline of the Indus civilization not as a sudden disappearance, but as a slow cultural diffusion spreading across South Asia. The people themselves do not vanish into mystery. They adapt, relocate, intermarry, and become part of emerging regional societies whose roots extend deeper into the past than many realize. You pass through one growing settlement near the Ganges Plain where homes cluster beside irrigation channels, reflecting late afternoon sunlight. Women grind grain beneath shaded shelters while children splash near muddy riverbanks. The scene feels familiar despite the changed geography. Human life continues with remarkable persistence, even after the fall of enormous urban systems once believed permanent. At sunset, smoke rises softly above these newer villages, while warm winds move through tall grasses bending beneath the fading light. Somewhere among the settlers are descendants of merchants, artisans, and builders who once walked the orderly streets of Mohenjo-daro. Their descendants may no longer remember every detail of those ancient cities, yet echoes of that world remain woven quietly into daily existence. One remarkable truth about history becomes visible here. Civilizations rarely disappear completely in the dramatic way old stories often suggest. More commonly, they dissolve gradually into neighboring cultures, leaving behind techniques, beliefs, foods, languages, and habits difficult to trace clearly afterward. Human identity flows through time, much like rivers shifting course across broad floodplains without ever truly stopping. You sit now beside a quiet eastern river while twilight spreads gently across the water. Fireflies drift above reeds moving slowly in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the distance a child laughs beside a cooking fire. The old Indus cities may be fading far behind these travelers, yet their civilization continues onward invisibly within memory, custom, and survival itself. And so the people of the Indus Valley do not truly disappear from history. They move gradually across the subcontinent, blending into newer societies with the same patience their ancestors once bring to farming, trade, and brickmaking beside ancient rivers. Like fertile silt carried downstream after seasonal floods, they quietly become part of larger civilizations continuing far beyond their first cities. Even today, the writing system of the Indus civilization remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of archaeology. Thousands of symbols survive across seals, tablets, pottery fragments, and small carved objects, yet their meaning continues resting just beyond human understanding. The silence surrounding these symbols feels strangely intimate, as though an entire civilization still whispers softly behind a locked door nobody has fully opened. You stand inside a modern museum where several Indus seals rest beneath warm yellow lights behind polished glass. They are surprisingly small, many fitting easily within the palm of your hand, carved carefully from smooth steatite stone thousands of years ago. Looking at them closely, you notice how delicate the lines appear, preserved with remarkable patience by dry earth and long-forgotten ruins. More than 4,000 individual Indus symbols have been documented by researchers over the last century. Some appear repeatedly across different cities, while others remain extremely rare. Most inscriptions are very short, often containing only a few characters arranged in neat horizontal sequences. Their brevity makes decipherment extraordinarily difficult, like trying to reconstruct an entire language from scattered fragments of shopping lists and name tags. Beside many inscriptions appear images of animals carved with graceful simplicity. Humped bulls stand calmly beneath mysterious symbols, while elephants, rhinoceroses, and water buffalo emerge from the polished stone with quiet dignity. Some seals display strange composite creatures that seem partly real and partly imagined, as though mythology and daily life drift together naturally inside the artistic world of the Indus people. One especially famous image depicts a seated figure surrounded by animals, possibly engaged in ritual or meditation. Scholars debate its meaning endlessly, though certainty remains impossible without understanding the script itself. Somewhere in a university office late at night, another exhausted researcher probably insists they are finally close to solving the mystery after consuming entirely unreasonable amounts of coffee. Over the decades, experts attempt countless methods to decode the Indus writing system. Some compare the symbols with ancient Dravidian languages still spoken in South Asia today. Others analyze patterns through statistical models or computer algorithms searching for hidden linguistic structures. More recently, artificial intelligence systems examine symbol frequencies and arrangements, hoping modern technology might reveal what centuries of scholarship cannot. Yet the script remains silent. Part of the difficulty lies in the absence of long surviving texts. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphics or Mesopotamian cuneiform, the Indus civilization leaves behind no monumental inscriptions carved across temple walls or royal tombs. There is no equivalent to the Rosetta Stone waiting patiently beneath desert sand. The civilization communicates briefly and carefully, leaving modern humanity with thousands of fragments, but almost no complete conversation. You imagine the ancient artisans carving these seals beneath afternoon light, filtering softly into quiet workshops. A merchant waits nearby, while symbols are pressed carefully into damp clay attached to jars, crates, or woven bundles prepared for trade. To the people of the Indus world, these markings are probably as ordinary and understandable as street signs or receipts are today. And yet every fluent reader of this script eventually disappears from history. The final person capable of reading those symbols never realizes they belong to the end of an unbroken tradition stretching back centuries. One evening, perhaps they sit beside a lamp, explaining the meaning of a seal to a younger apprentice who never fully learns the system afterward. Language sometimes vanishes, not through catastrophe, but through slow interruption, like music fading gradually beyond hearing distance. Inside museums today, the seals rest quietly beneath glass while visitors drift past speaking many different modern languages. Soft reflections from overhead lights shimmer across stone surfaces once touched by human hands more than 4,000 years ago. The feeling becomes strangely intimate, as though distant history still breathes softly beneath the silence. Across impossible stretches of time, the fingerprints of vanished people seem to linger invisibly upon these carefully carved objects. Each symbol remains unreadable, yet still deeply human. The seals feel less like artifacts displayed for study and more like quiet messages paused halfway through a conversation that history never fully finished explaining. No one knows exactly what stories the people of the Indus Valley share after dark, beside their wells and brick courtyards. Perhaps they speak about seasonal floods descending from distant mountains, returning caravans crossing dangerous deserts, or stars moving slowly above sleeping rooftops, while warm evening winds drift softly through the quiet streets. You can almost hear fragments of those conversations lingering beneath the silence of the undeciphered script. A parent calming a restless child during monsoon storms, traders discussing water levels along river routes, neighbors laughing softly beside cooking fires while smoke rises gently into the night. Human life itself remains recognizable even when the words become unreachable across time. Archaeologists sometimes describe the Indus civilization as oddly elusive compared with other ancient societies. There are no dramatic royal chronicles celebrating military victories, no giant statues proclaiming the glory of emperors. Instead, the civilization leaves behind careful urban planning, graceful craftsmanship, and thousands of tiny unreadable inscriptions whispering from the edges of understanding. Perhaps that incompleteness is part of what makes the Indus world feel so hauntingly peaceful today. Because we cannot fully decode their language, the civilization avoids becoming overly familiar or rigidly explained. It remains suspended somewhere between history and imagination, allowing each generation to approach the ruins with fresh curiosity rather than final certainty. You leave the museum slowly while evening rain taps softly against the windows outside. The small seals remain motionless beneath warm lights, their symbols still holding secrets no living person can fully read. Yet somehow their silence does not feel empty. It feels patient, like a story continuing quietly beneath deep water long after the visible surface grows calm. And so the civilization of the Indus Valley endures partly through mystery itself. Its unfinished language drifts gently through human imagination, like a half-remembered dream, incomplete yet strangely beautiful. Between unreadable symbols, the ancient world still waits quietly beneath time, listening for understanding once more. After the great cities of the Indus civilization slowly empty, time begins its long and patient work upon the abandoned plains. Wind moves steadily across the old streets year after year, carrying dust from distant dry lands and settling it gently against brick walls already weakened by centuries of sun and rain. Nothing disappears quickly here. The earth prefers gradual erasure over sudden destruction. The once ordered cities begin collapsing inward slowly beneath their own weight. Roofs cave quietly into empty rooms, while exposed walls soften beneath seasonal floods and burning heat. Over many generations, drifting silt and desert sand bury entire neighborhoods, until the great urban centers resemble little more than low, silent mounds scattered across the wide landscape. You walk across one of these ancient rises centuries later without realizing what sleeps beneath your feet. Sparse grasses move in warm wind above buried streets once filled with merchants, craftsmen, and children carrying water from public wells. The world above remains entirely ordinary. Only the hidden geometry beneath the soil remembers the existence of carefully planned cities stretching silently below the plain. For hundreds of years, local communities living near these mounds do not fully understand their origin. Old bricks occasionally emerge after heavy rains, and fragments of pottery surface beneath plows or along riverbanks. People reuse the materials naturally because ancient baked bricks remain remarkably durable. To villagers nearby, the ruins appear less like lost civilizations and more like convenient quarries patiently waiting beneath the earth. In the 19th century, British engineers constructing railways across colonial India unknowingly removed thousands of ancient bricks from Harappa to build railway ballast and infrastructure. Workers carry away carefully fired bricks created more than 4,000 years earlier, impressed mainly by their strength and uniformity rather than their archaeological significance. Somewhere, an exhausted railway supervisor probably congratulates himself on finding unusually reliable construction material. The strange mounds continue attracting occasional curiosity, though their true importance remains hidden for decades. Travelers describe scattered ruins and weathered bricks protruding from dusty ground beneath the Punjab sun, yet few imagine they belong to one of the world's earliest urban civilizations. History often sleeps quietly beneath ordinary landscapes, while people pass over it without noticing anything unusual at all. Then, during the 1920s, systematic excavations led by British and Indian archaeologists finally begin uncovering the astonishing scale of the forgotten Indus civilization. Researchers, including Sir John Marshall and Rakal Das Banerjee, carefully remove layers of hardened soil beneath the hot Punjab sun, gradually exposing buried streets, ancient wells, workshops, and brick structures hidden for thousands of silent years. With every season of excavation, the lost cities emerge more clearly into daylight after centuries beneath dust and earth. Archaeologists brush sand gently from carved seals and collapsed walls, while long straight roads slowly reappear beneath their tools. The discoveries reveal not isolated ruins, but an immense urban civilization whose quiet sophistication surprises historians across the modern world. You imagine the first moments when excavators uncover straight brick walls beneath compacted soil. Workers kneel carefully beside exposed foundations, while archaeologists brush dust gently from carved seals and pottery fragments. The discoveries arrive slowly, piece by piece, like fragments of memory returning after a long and dreamless sleep beneath the ground. The excavation process itself unfolds with remarkable patience. Soft brushes sweep away dirt from tiny statues no taller than a hand, while dry soil crumbles carefully beneath delicate tools under the intense heat of Punjab afternoons. Archaeologists move methodically through the ruins because every layer of earth contains fragile evidence preserved across immense stretches of time. One famous discovery, the bronze figure often called the dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro, emerges from the soil with astonishing grace still visible in its posture. Her small metal form stands relaxed and confident, one hand resting upon her hip as though completely unimpressed by the passage of 4,000 years. Ancient art occasionally carries the energy of someone who absolutely knows they look iconic. The seals uncovered from these buried cities deepen the mystery even further. Their unreadable symbols remain perfectly carved despite centuries underground, preserving a language modern scholars still cannot fully understand. Each object lifted from the soil feels less like a simple artifact and more like a quiet voice interrupted halfway through speaking. Archaeologists walking through these excavated streets often describe a strange emotional atmosphere surrounding the ruins. Unlike many ancient sites dominated by giant monuments to military conquest, the Indus cities feel calm and deeply human in scale. The carefully arranged homes, drainage channels, wells, and workshops suggest ordinary life unfolding peacefully across generations before fading gradually back into silence. You stand now among exposed brick foundations, while warm evening light stretches long shadows across the ruins. Wind moves softly through empty corridors where water once flowed beneath the streets with impressive precision. The city no longer contains voices, yet traces of human presence linger everywhere. Worn stairways, bathing platforms, storage rooms, and courtyards shaped carefully around daily routines long vanished. Each artifact recovered from beneath the earth becomes a small echo from another world. A clay toy cart suggests children once playfully drag it through dusty streets. A shell bracelet remembers hands that wear it beside public wells and crowded marketplaces. A stone weight recalls merchants balancing trade goods beneath woven awnings during long forgotten afternoons beside the river. Modern archaeologists often move carefully through these sites with a sense of quiet respect, aware that the ruins represent more than lost architecture alone. They preserve evidence of human adaptation, cooperation, creativity, and impermanence across enormous spans of time. The buried cities become reminders that even the most organized societies eventually surrender themselves to changing rivers, climate, and memory. And so, beneath silent layers of dust and sand, the civilization of the Indus Valley slowly begins telling its story again. Not through grand declarations or complete explanations, but through fragments, absences, and unanswered questions scattered gently across the ruins. From the patient earth itself, the lost cities rise once more, speaking softly through the spaces where certainty has long since faded away. Today, many scientists and historians view the Indus civilization as one of the rare examples of a large ancient society that thrives for centuries without leaving strong evidence of aggressive militarization. Its cities appear organized around water systems, trade networks, craftsmanship, and urban planning rather than constant warfare. In a human story often dominated by conquest, the Indus world feels unusually calm, like a long, steady breath held beneath the noise of history. You walk slowly through the ruins of Mohenjo-daro, beneath the soft light of late afternoon, and what strikes you most is not grandeur, but balance. The streets remain carefully measured. Wells still stand beside homes after thousands of years. Drainage channels continue tracing neat lines beneath the earth. The civilization seems built less around domination and more around maintaining ordinary life with remarkable consistency. Modern researchers often point to the Indus Valley when discussing resilience and environmental adaptation. For centuries, these communities managed changing rivers, seasonal floods, agricultural cycles, and long-distance trade with impressive stability. Their success depends not upon controlling nature completely, but upon learning how to live within its shifting rhythms without exhausting the systems supporting daily survival. Yet eventually, the climate changes beyond the balance they know how to maintain comfortably. Monsoon patterns weaken, rivers shift unpredictably, agricultural systems face increasing pressure across wide regions. The civilization does not collapse instantly into chaos. Instead, it transforms slowly into smaller and more dispersed communities, adapting gradually rather than breaking apart in one catastrophic moment. This quiet transformation fascinates many modern climate researchers today. The Indus civilization becomes a gentle reminder that nature always moves according to cycles larger than human ambition or political power. Entire urban systems can flourish for centuries while remaining vulnerable to subtle environmental changes unfolding patiently across generations. The earth rarely hurries, yet it always continues changing beneath human feet. Inside museums across Pakistan and India, small Indus artifacts now rest silently beneath warm, controlled lighting while visitors move carefully past glass displays. A carved seal sits beside a clay figurine. Nearby rests a copper tool, darkened softly by age. The objects themselves are modest in size, yet they carry the emotional weight of a civilization once spread across enormous river plains beneath ancient skies. You pause before a small terracotta bracelet shaped by human hands 4,000 years ago. Nearby lies a tiny cubical die marked with dots nearly identical to modern gaming dice used today. A simple comb carved from ivory rests quietly beside them. The effect feels strangely intimate. Across vast distances of time, ordinary people still worry about appearance, entertainment, routine, and comfort in remarkably familiar ways. One child visiting the museum presses their face close to the glass while staring at the ancient toys displayed inside. Perhaps they imagine children from the Indus cities laughing beside dusty courtyards or floating small clay boats through puddles after monsoon rain. History becomes easier to understand once you realize ancient people probably also stepped painfully on unexpected objects left scattered across the floor. The ruins teach something deeper than historical facts alone. They remind you that civilization is ultimately constructed from simple repeated needs: access to water, shelter from heat and cold, safe streets, food storage, trade, and a sense of belonging within a community. Empires may rise and fade dramatically in textbooks, yet daily life always returns to these same quiet foundations. Archaeologists continue uncovering evidence of sophisticated urban planning throughout the Indus world. Standardized brick sizes appear across cities separated by hundreds of miles. Drainage systems remain astonishingly advanced for their time. Public wells provide widespread access to clean water. These achievements reveal a civilization deeply invested in practical cooperation and shared civic order rather than monumental displays of individual rulers. You sit quietly now inside a museum gallery while soft footsteps echo across polished floors. Visitors speak in hushed voices beneath dim lighting designed to protect fragile artifacts from damage. Beyond the windows, modern cities hum with traffic, electric lights, and crowded streets. Yet inside these rooms, the ancient world rests peacefully beneath glass, suspended gently between memory and silence. One remarkable lesson of the Indus civilization lies in its relationship with scale. The society grows enormous without leaving overwhelming monuments to kings or military triumphs. Instead, its greatest achievements are systems supporting ordinary life over long periods of time. Water management, sanitation, trade consistency, and urban organization become the true architecture of stability beneath the broad river skies. Modern cities today still struggle with many of the same concerns faced by the people of the Indus Valley thousands of years ago. Clean water remains essential. Climate patterns still shape human settlement. Flood control, sustainable infrastructure, and social cooperation continue determining whether communities thrive or weaken over time. Human technology evolves, yet certain challenges remain surprisingly constant beneath history's changing surface. As evening settles outside the museum, warm reflections shimmer softly across the glass cases holding the artifacts of forgotten cities. The small objects seem almost peaceful in their stillness, no longer part of crowded marketplaces or busy homes. Yet they continue carrying traces of the people who once hold them during ordinary afternoons beside flowing rivers and sunlit courtyards. You begin realizing that the story of the Indus civilization is not memorable simply because of its mysterious disappearance. What truly lingers in the imagination is the extraordinary length of its quiet existence. For thousands of years, people there build homes, raise children, trade goods, maintain wells, and live carefully beside the rivers without filling history entirely with war and conquest. Perhaps that is why the ruins still feel calming today. Beneath dust, broken bricks, and undeciphered symbols, the civilization continues radiating a quiet sense of balance and patience that survives even after thousands of silent years beneath the earth. Its people seem to understand that survival rarely comes from overpowering the world around them. Instead, they move gently within nature's rhythms, much like water flowing steadily through the wide and patient plains of the ancient Indus Valley beneath endless changing skies. Each modern monsoon returning to South Asia carries with it a faint memory of the ancient Indus world. Rain clouds still gather slowly over the Arabian Sea before drifting inland across Pakistan and northwestern India, just as they do thousands of years ago. The rhythm feels older than civilization itself, repeating patiently above rivers, deserts, farms, and crowded modern cities without ever truly stopping. You stand beside a wide river during the beginning of the rainy season while heavy clouds darken the afternoon sky. Warm wind moves through tall grasses bending near muddy banks, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls softly across the plains. The smell of wet earth rises gently into the air, carrying the same familiar scent once breathed by the people of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Water continues shaping the land exactly as it always has. Rivers deposit rich silt across floodplains before carrying it away again during stronger seasonal currents. Footprints appear briefly beside the banks, only to vanish beneath fresh layers of mud and flowing water days later. Nature preserves no permanent map of human movement. It simply continues rewriting the surface of the earth over and over again. Modern satellite technology occasionally reveals traces of ancient riverbeds hidden beneath deserts and dry terrain. From high above the planet, researchers detect long buried channels stretching faintly across the landscape, like pale veins beneath weathered skin. Some scientists believe these forgotten waterways once support thriving settlements connected to the wider Indus civilization before climate and geology slowly alter their course. The discovery of these buried rivers feels strangely poetic. Entire waterways vanish from the visible world, while continuing to exist quietly beneath layers of sand and sediment. History behaves similarly. Civilizations disappear from ordinary memory, yet traces remain hidden beneath language, landscape, and tradition, waiting patiently for future generations to notice them once again. Today, human beings build cities far larger than Mohenjo-daro ever becomes. Glass towers rise above crowded highways while millions depend upon electrical grids, dams, pipelines, and vast global trade systems connecting continents through invisible digital networks. Modern life appears unimaginably advanced, yet beneath the technology, humanity still depends completely upon stable water, climate, and cooperation. Despite centuries of scientific progress, modern societies continue facing many of the same questions once encountered beside the Indus River thousands of years ago. How should cities manage water responsibly across growing populations? How can communities adapt when climates slowly shift beyond familiar patterns? Even now, civilization remains tied closely to rivers, seasons, and the fragile balance between nature and human ambition. How do you live sustainably beside unpredictable water systems? How long can agricultural balance survive changing climate patterns? What happens when environmental pressure gradually exceeds the stability of familiar routines? These questions remain remarkably unchanged across time, even if the tools and languages surrounding them evolve continuously. Human civilization still depends, as always, upon water, cooperation, and adaptation. You walk now through a modern archaeological site at dusk somewhere in Pakistan, where fragments of ancient brick walls still emerge from dusty ground beneath a fading sky. Warm evening wind moves softly across the ruins while distant city lights flicker faintly along the horizon. The contrast between ancient silence and modern movement feels strangely gentle rather than dramatic. At night, the old Indus sites become extraordinarily quiet again. Moonlight settles across broken walls and partially excavated streets, while dry grass whispers softly in the wind. The same stars once visible above the ancient cities still hang over the plains, unchanged by human history unfolding briefly beneath them. Somewhere nearby, an archaeologist probably forgets where they placed their notebook for the third time that evening. Beneath deep layers of sand and soil, countless undiscovered artifacts still remain hidden from the modern world. Seals bearing unreadable symbols rest untouched inside collapsed rooms and buried workshops. Pottery fragments lie quietly beneath abandoned courtyards where children once played beside water jars and sleeping dogs. Entire stories continue waiting patiently underground without any urgency to reveal themselves immediately. That endless waiting gives the Indus civilization an unusual presence within human imagination. Unlike many ancient empires explained through long written records and named rulers, the Indus world remains partly concealed behind silence and mystery. It never fully leaves history because so much of it still sleeps beneath the earth, unfinished and unresolved like a dream interrupted before morning. You imagine future archaeologists, centuries from now, uncovering another forgotten seal beneath layers of hardened soil after monsoon rain exposes a buried wall. A careful brush removes dust from its surface, while unreadable symbols emerge once again into sunlight after thousands of years in darkness. The object says nothing aloud, yet somehow it still carries the quiet emotional weight of an entire vanished civilization. Even now, rivers continue moving through the region with immense patience. Floodwaters reshape fields. Sediment gathers along changing banks. Villages rise and disappear. Modern highways cross plains once traveled by ancient merchants guiding ox carts toward distant cities beneath the same humid skies. Human life changes endlessly, yet the deeper rhythms of the landscape continue almost untouched beneath temporary generations. You sit quietly beside the ruins while warm wind carries the scent of distant rain across the darkening plains. Somewhere beneath the soil below your feet, buried streets still follow their ancient geometric patterns exactly as they do 4,000 years ago. Wells remain hidden underground. Drainage channels wait silently in darkness. The old cities are not truly gone. They are simply sleeping. Perhaps that is why the civilization of the Indus Valley continues lingering so gently within human memory. It does not end through one dramatic catastrophe or final battle. Instead, it slowly settles beneath layers of earth, while rivers continue carrying monsoon waters toward distant seas beneath endless changing skies. Like an ancient current moving silently beneath dry desert sand, the Indus world still drifts quietly beneath modern time. Its cities remain buried, its symbols unread, yet its presence continues flowing softly through history, reminding humanity that even vanished civilizations may never disappear completely from the deeper memory of the earth. In the end, every civilization becomes only a thin layer of sediment resting quietly within the almost endless geological history of the Earth. Empires rise beside rivers, expand across valleys, and fill their streets with voices, trade, music, and ambition. Yet eventually the land absorbs them all with remarkable patience, folding human history gently back into dust, stone, water, and silence beneath enormous skies. You sit now beside the imagined banks of the ancient Indus River beneath a deep and quiet night. Thin mist drifts slowly above dark water, while distant stars softly across the wide plains of South Asia. The air feels cooler after sunset, and somewhere far away a night bird calls once, before fading back into the immense stillness surrounding the river. The cities of the Indus civilization once pulsed with life across these plains for thousands of years. Wells echo with footsteps during early mornings. Markets fill with merchants carrying cotton, grain, beads, and polished stone. Children run through brick courtyards while water moves carefully beneath the streets through covered drainage channels. Entire generations live ordinary lives without knowing how distant their world will eventually become, and yet time continues moving with perfect calm. The rivers slowly shift their courses beneath changing climates and patient tectonic movements. Monsoon patterns strengthen and weaken over centuries. Trade routes alter gradually. Populations drift eastward toward more stable water sources. The civilization transforms so gently that no single moment fully marks its ending. Like a long rainy season fading into dry weather, the Indus world simply dissolves into history, little by little. What remains afterward is not the glory of kings or the memory of famous battles. In truth, humanity does not even know with certainty whether powerful kings rule these cities at all. No giant statues survive proclaiming royal victories. No dramatic chronicles celebrate conquest. Instead, the civilization leaves behind carefully arranged bricks, silent streets, unreadable seals, and a lingering atmosphere of unusual stillness. Perhaps that quietness becomes the civilization's greatest legacy. You walk once more through excavated ruins beneath pale moonlight, while broken walls cast soft shadows across ancient streets. Warm desert wind moves gently through exposed foundations, and even after 4,000 years, the city still feels calm and deliberate, with straight streets, circular wells, and careful drains preserved silently beneath the earth. A small seal rests beneath museum glass tonight, while silent visitors drift slowly past nearby. Its symbols remain undeciphered, and a carved bull waits beneath markings no living person fully understands anymore. Yet the object still carries something deeply human: patience, craftsmanship, memory, routine, and the quiet desire to leave a lasting trace against time itself. The Indus civilization rises, flourishes, and fades, much like the rivers surrounding it. Water arrives from distant mountains, spreads life across the plains, and eventually changes direction beneath forces larger than any human society can fully control. Civilizations behave similarly. They gather people together for a while beneath shared rhythms, before gradually flowing onward into new forms shaped by changing landscapes and generations. Modern humanity often imagines history through dramatic endings, yet the Indus world suggests something far softer and quieter. Some societies do not vanish through destruction or conquest. Instead, they slowly scatter across wider horizons, leaving traces inside future cultures, languages, and traditions. Like fertile silt carried after monsoon floods, their presence survives beyond fallen cities. You imagine the ancient river moving slowly through darkness beneath distant stars. Water touches soft earth with steady rhythmic sounds, repeating endlessly across the quiet night. The current never hurries and carries no concern for empires or centuries. Long before the first settlements appear, the river already flows here, and long after cities fade, it continues onward unchanged. Somewhere beneath deep layers of soil, more buried streets still sleep undisturbed. Unexcavated wells remain sealed beneath hardened earth. Forgotten seals rest in darkness beside collapsed walls, while roots and insects move gently through abandoned rooms. The ancient cities continue existing below the surface, not as dead places, but as sleeping landscapes waiting patiently within the memory of the planet itself. Above the buried ruins, modern life continues moving endlessly forward. Cars cross crowded highways, while electric lights glow through dense neighborhoods during monsoon evenings. Rain taps softly against apartment windows as millions drift toward sleep beside rivers still shaping the land exactly as they do thousands of years earlier beneath familiar dark skies. You begin realizing how small human history truly appears beside geological time. Entire civilizations occupy only brief moments within the long existence of rivers, mountains, deserts, and stars above the earth. The baked bricks of Mohenjo-daro feel unimaginably ancient to modern minds, yet even they represent only a passing instant within the planet's slow-breathing rhythm. Still, those passing moments remain deeply meaningful because people live fully within them. Families gather beneath warm evening light, while merchants speak quietly inside crowded markets, and children run laughing through dusty courtyards after sunset. The Indus civilization reminds you that greatness sometimes exists not through conquest, but through balance, patience, craftsmanship, and centuries of peaceful ordinary life beside flowing rivers. Now the night grows deeper across the plains of the ancient Indus Valley. The stars above remain steady and cold, shining over ruins, deserts, rivers, and sleeping cities both ancient and modern. Warm wind drifts softly through the darkness, while the imagined sound of flowing water continues somewhere beyond sight. The river moves patiently onward through mist and silence, remembering everything and holding nothing forever. You listen to the gentle rhythm of water touching earth again and again across the endless distance of time. The sound grows softer now, fading slowly into the stillness of the night. History dissolves into landscape. Landscape dissolves into darkness. And in that quiet merging of memory, nature, and sleep, every story eventually returns to silence. The world becomes calm. The river continues flowing, and somewhere beneath the deep earth, the ancient cities rest peacefully beneath layers of sand and stars, waiting without urgency beneath the endless breathing of the planet. The script comes to a close. Thank you all for listening.